Hi, and welcome to In the Aisleways. I am your host, Lola Michelin, and we're coming to you from Horse World Connect. And today I am very excited to have one of our mastermind members with me today, Gloria Lybecker of Healing You Sanctuary, is here to talk about resonant language and whatever else we come up with. So, Gloria, I'm so glad to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Lola. I really look forward to it.
Wonderful. So I guess to start out, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, well, I guess the short version is once upon a time, I was born on this earth. That's how I ended up coming where I'm at now. And it really does go back to those first beginnings, because that's where we first develop our attachments in life. And
Mm,
whether it's going to be secure attachment, or maybe it'll be avoidant or ambivalent, or some of us end up with disorganized attachment, depending on what our life experiences. And unfortunately, I had some very immature parents, but I was very loved by them.
mm,
And I was in situations that I ended up being pretty traumatic. And
mm,
through that, I had the gift of, he was like my grandpa, but he was actually my grandpa's first cousin. And he brought horses out to our farm and he
right.
taught me to ride. And I got to name the horse. She's a little black Morgan mare. I named her Beauty.
Aw,
And she pretty much saved my life and my sanity because she was my best friend and confidant.
mm.
And I just still love her and have her picture on my wall today.
That's such a beautiful story. How many times is it the case that a horse brings somebody out of the darkness or out of a place of, confusion and kind of helps to set them down a path where we can all benefit. So thank you so much for sharing that. I know that that can be a very difficult thing to talk about, and you talk about it so well. As I've told you before, one of my things that I just love about you is your use of language,
Mm.
not just language that's based in the sciences that you have studied and teach, but also just in the language of your heart is so beautiful. So I'd really love to kind of concentrate on some of that language today if we could.
It would be fun.
Yeah. So one of the things that you work with is something called resonant language. And that was a new term or terminology to me when I first stumbled upon it. I'm wondering if you can share with our listeners what resonant language is and how you use that in your sessions.
Well, resonant language is a language that brings you into the relational space with life itself. And it also includes dropping down into body sensations. And then the sensations become the emotional flavors of life. And then connecting that even further down into the roots of what are the needs underneath that. And
Mm,
that's kind of a way of distilling down the whole process. But of course, just like roots, they're very complex and they can go many places. And so it's learning how to tune in and to really accompany the moment and to be curious and open-hearted with warmth and resonance. And when you have resonance, if you think about, I play guitar, as you can see,
yes.
and if you have two guitars sitting side by side, and if you pluck one string on one, the other string will resonate with it.
Right.
So it's a way to begin to see the resonance that can happen between nervous systems.
Mm,
And so that's the real relationship. You know, I talked about attachment before. When we're born, it's really important that main relationship we have with our caretaker, to have the warm eye gaze that allows the oxytocin to begin to flow, and there's the bonding that happens. And so it's a way of bridging that and making connections that we need to really be self-sustaining and interrelational.
right. And you mentioned the musicality of that. That was one of the first things that struck me was, resonance to me is musical. It's
Mhm.
lyrical, but it's also just that tonality. And I often use that term in my teaching, like when you do something, does it resonate with you? Or if you're, with a horse and you're working towards something, does it resonate? And that sense of, for me, that sense of like, if things don't resonate, they feel slightly out of balance or off kilter. It doesn't mean that they're good or bad, just
Yeah.
means that they're not like linked up on that plane. The example of the guitar string is just a perfect illustration of that. So um, can you give me, and I know it's a lot to ask in a brief time, I'm sure, but can you give me an example of how somebody discovers that resonant language? Like, is there actually a vocabulary that's specific to each individual of how they can use language in a way to bring resonance into their life?
Well, there are certain keys, like if you use poetry, that's a resonant
Mm,
language. If
mm,
you can use, well, even the nonverbals, resonant language, it's going to be using sensations and feelings and needs. It's also going to be the different frequencies of the energies is another type.
mm,
The
mhm,
nonverbal is going to be facial expression, eye gaze, tone of voice, the prosody of the voice, the timing of it all, the cadence.
mm,
And so
mhm.
all of those types of ways really come in. Actually, swearing is a resonant language. It's a real right hemisphere language,
Interesting,
especially
right?
the really strong ones. Yes. And so there's probably a couple I'm not thinking of right now, but those are kind of the way that are little pockets or containers that we can begin to access as we seek to tune in with someone else. So you think about a radio frequency and tuning in and finding that station. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So I'm just thinking in our work with horses, how that shows up,
mhm,
and I can picture myself, in working with my horse, trying to find the tone of voice that
yeah,
gets the response that I need. Or, if we're reassuring an anxious horse, it's
mhm,
definitely going to change the tone that we use with our voice, or the speed of our voice, or the
yeah,
the
the tempo.
temper of the
Yeah.
voice, even if the words that we're saying aren't necessarily
Mhm.
related. You can use tonality to create that resonance.
Yes, also horses are they're beings. How do I say this? Their guts and their hearts are really big, and so they're resonant beings right there.
Mhm.
They live in the world of frequencies, and so they are going to be reading our guts and our hearts for the frequencies we contain, and so they're really going to pick up on our intention just like they would any other mammal in life, or even the weather as it comes. They always tell us before we know that the weather's
Right.
changing.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. So, really, language is a much broader term when we're talking about resonant language than
Yeah.
just language in
Words.
terms of words. Wow, such an amazing concept to me. So, you have a number of things that you're actively pursuing. The Healing You Sanctuary podcast that is featured on Horse World Connect, of course, is just one of the ways you get your vast knowledge out to the public. You also have the Relational Neuroscience and Communication Institute. This was fascinating to me. Can you tell me more about this branch of your work?
Well, this branch of my work is it really is I don't know, kind of a library, or it's a place to offer access to more people because I can only work with so many people here in person.
Mm,
And so I've created different courses and different opportunities for people to learn more about the relational neuroscience and about communication, which for me it's all about heart-centered
mm,
communication.
mhm,
And so those my I guess my background in that is as a mother, my fifth child, he I didn't know how to reach him in the way that I did my other children, and I didn't know what was different. And as a counselor, I used all of my skills that I knew, and that wasn't enough. So I
mm,
started researching things, and that's when I found nonviolent communication.
mm,
And because my child would have, he would have what I would call limbic burst. It seemed as if it was violent, but I knew there was some pain in there
mm.
somewhere. How could I begin to get beneath the behavior? Because just like horses, all behavior is communication.
Right.
And so when I found nonviolent communication, it started to give me more of a language that I could start to tune in to see how I could connect with him at a heart level. And then I also found with my colleague and really good friend of many years, Sarah Payton, we were studying interpersonal neurobiology, particularly Daniel Siegel's work, but there's a branch of many. When we started to blend these together and practice with one another, it was really important for me to have an empathy buddy that could help me to practice what I wanted to be able to support my child with. And
Mm.
that's how I ended up developing what I do. And it just expanded when I just did it with my herd of horses as well. And so the different courses that are on there all come from that heart-centered way of being. And there's different focuses and different kinds of opportunities depending on who you are, what you're interested in.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. I cannot wait to dive into that. I think that that would be a really great thing for people to check out and get involved with. So you mentioned your children. You have 5. Are they also horse enthusiasts like yourself, or do they?
My 2 daughters are, and my youngest
Mhm.
son was for a time until his horse passed, and then he backed away.
Mhm.
But both of my daughters, it was so fun when they were young because they got to do the horse 4-H thing, and I got to be their champion, and I got to be their lackey, and, and it was just heaven on earth. And
Mm,
they've both grown, and now they each have their own homes, but they still have a fondness for the horses.
wonderful. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about the neuroscience, um, neuroplasticity.
Oh, yeah.
And this is something that really fascinates me. And I try to, anything I can find to read about neuroplasticity, it really interests me. Do you think, and is there concrete evidence that horses have this similar or same kind of neuroplasticity that people do? And what are the things that really help us enhance that
Mm.
ability for our mind and neurology to be flexible?
Yeah, I do believe that it's possible. I love the work of Jaak Panksepp,
Mm,
um, Jaak Panksepp, Panksepp, I think it is. He's passed
thank you.
already, but he was like way ahead of his time. And he did a lot of research around the circuits of emotion and motivation. And all mammals share them. And he did a lot of his research using rats. But so there's some wonderful information there, and it's work that I pull from when I'm working with people and with horses. And when we can really start to tune in to those different frequencies of emotion and what is the purpose for them and how can we contribute to them. If you think about this different circuits being like a train station, when we have our circuits all working, then our trains can go from point A to point B and all the way to Z when we need them to.
Hmm.
But if they get entangled and twisted, we can have train wrecks. And so
Mm.
that kind of can be a way that we can see trauma. Or if we have, when we were younger, or at any point in our life, really, when we've had trauma, maybe one of our circuits gets turned off. It doesn't mean it's not there. So even with people that are known as on the spectrum, and we have learning lagging skills, then they still have the circuitry. It's just, can we tune in to invite that connection to finally be made? And that
Yeah.
would be what I would call the neuroplasticity. And Daniel Siegel has some research you could look into as well, as far as he's worked with a very elderly man who had had trauma. And based on his work with him, the gentleman was able to embody the neuroplasticity to begin to do things that he'd never been able to do.
Yeah.
And so that to me is just so, I don't know, I'm very passionate about it and excited about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many fascinating stories about, using neuroplasticity with people in order to help them heal. And, I think of the work of people like Joe Dispenza and being able to just rewire your brain using the raw materials that you have, the experiences that you have, regardless, whether you view them positively or negatively now, how you can use them as stepping stones to developing these greater pathways of thinking. And I think I see that in horses as well. When you watch them try to figure something out, I kind of see those same concepts at play. And I think that it would be really intriguing to find ways to work with horses and the people that are caring for those horses in developing games or activities that can help create neuroplasticity for horses as well. I was, as you were talking about frequencies, I was shuffling through some papers trying to find a list I had just seen recently, just in the last day or two, a list of frequencies related to activities, which was interesting to me
Oh,
because I think of frequencies as being related, like different tissues, different organs have different frequencies. And when we're selecting, an essential oil to use or a Bach flower remedy to use, or I'm choosing a setting for my laser, I'm often thinking in terms of frequencies. But I had just seen something that was talking about how um, the frequency of emotions, and you probably have some, you can probably fill in the gaps for me, but it was saying how the frequency, it was relating it to COVID-19 and how the frequency of that virus is between zero point 0.2 and zero point 0.9. I wasn't sure if it was hertz or megahertz, but I think it must have been hertz. Um, and then it was saying, anxiety is like a zero point 0.2, fear is like a zero point 0.9 to 0.12 to 12. And then things like singing, dancing, um, um, uh, playing with your dog, those were all really high frequencies. And how they were saying, looking at the different people who are faced, who are to test positive, they were trying to see like if people with higher frequencies have less effect from the virus versus people who are in lower frequencies because of either the work they do or their life situation. And they were seeing a correlation. And I immediately thought, like, well, how about for our horses? You think about in a barn aisle when maybe, um, flu, rhino comes through, or herpes virus comes through, which horses are susceptible to it and which are not. And if it is about their frequency, can we just create environments and activities that constantly help to support and raise their frequency, which I'm sure is what the resonant language is all about.
yeah, which to me, it would bring it all back to the relationship. It's not just the environment, but what's the relationship that we have with our equines in that environment that actually creates what Stephen Porges, who is another person I would recommend highly to our viewers, who's done vast studies in frequencies. And so I
Mhm.
guess another one of the hats I carry is I'm an advanced practitioner for integrated listening systems, of which Stephen Porges contributed his research to develop what's known as the Safe and Sound Protocol. And so it's all about listening to the frequencies that go into our vagus nerve, both our seventh and 10th ones, so for facial recognition, as well as the ventral.
Mhm.
And that's in order for our social engagement system to be open to the frequencies of the human voice, which means we can be in relationship. So
Mhm.
it's a very powerful tool that can be utilized to help support healing trauma, or even just to invoke the empowerment to be who we were created to be. I'd love to pop those on my horse and see what happens, but I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. Oh, well, when you do, you'll have to check back with us and tell us all about it, because I think it'll be fascinating. I have been talking with a number of my clients and trainers in the hunter jumper industry specifically recently, and they have been noting that, since uh, this situation that we've been in this year, they've noticed a huge increase in the people wanting riding lessons and wanting horse interaction, or even wanting to lease or purchase a horse. And I find that really exciting that people, unfortunately, perhaps because they're not able to engage in the other activities with others that they have historically done, they're turning to horses. And I'm sure part of that is the magnetic draw that horses have, the fact that their electromagnetic field is so powerful, and that when we're inside that field, the impact on our heart is just to lower our stress and lower our blood pressure and lower anxiety. And I'm sure many of us are in need of that currently. So I just think the work that you're doing has incredible implications for the future, for the near future of the horse industry.
Yeah. Heart Math Institute also has some
Yes.
interesting studies on that, which you
Mm-hmm.
talk about the electromagnetic field. They've got a
Yes.
lot of beautiful imagery that you can look at too. But
Yeah.
yeah, being beside a horse and feeling safe, especially, um, or when you get to work with somebody that is skilled in supporting you, you may not feel safe, but then you discover that it is safe. That's
Mm-hmm.
where neuroplasticity is happening.
Yeah.
It's in those moments, these aha moments where you just actually feel felt, is the way I like to say it, and and it feels good.
Yeah. I said earlier that I just love your use of language, and I could listen to you all day. I could talk with you all day long because it's just so fascinating to me, the avenues we go down. I'm sure many of our listeners feel the same way and want to learn more about your work. Can you tell us a little bit about how to best connect with you?
Yeah, if you'd like to get to have a conversation with me, you can have a free consultation. I'm going to my website, healingyoursanctuary.com, and just have a conversation about what's going to be most supportive for you. If you're
Wonderful.
interested in getting to maybe browse around and see what kind of courses you might find interesting, you can go to my other website, which is rncinstitute.com, and check it out. And I believe there's ways you can get a hold of me there too. But I'd love to hear from anyone. Yeah.
Great. And you can listen in on Sundays on Horse World Connect to Gloria's fantastic podcast, the Healing You Sanctuary podcast. And I thank you so much for taking time out today to share your vast knowledge and your heart with us.
Oh, thank you. It was such a delight. I've enjoyed every moment.
Well, thank you for listening. This is Lola Michelin, and I'll see you in the aisleways.